yeah, I think it's critical that you understand the whole picture and what's going on. But yeah, the things that a human sees and that you try to process is it's difficult. It
Yep.
is. It really is.
Hello and welcome to the Mighty Oak Show today. Glad to have you with us again, and I hope you have had a great week. The world is crazy, but it's good to know that there are a lot of things that do not change, and this show is one of those things. So thank you for joining us. And if you are not watching on YouTube, take some time to jump over there. Perhaps you're listening to the podcast or over at our partners at Mojo 50. Thank you for listening there. Love anywhere you have the opportunity to receive this content and this show. Glad that you would do that. Thank you for doing that. But when you get a chance, jump over to YouTube. You can go ahead and look for the Mighty Oaks Foundation, Mighty Oaks Warrior Programs on YouTube. You'll find us there, and we have tons of content, and looking forward to producing even more content for you. But go ahead and subscribe to the channel. That would be great. Hit the notification bell. That lets you know when more content comes online. If you'd like to leave us a comment, please do that. Love to receive comments and to interact there on YouTube. Share the content out to anyone that you think may be interested or that this would especially be pertinent to. It's funny, we have so many different conversations with different folks, and every once in a while you'll hear something and that's going to connect to you or to someone that you care about, and I would encourage you to send this out to them, and thankful for the opportunity to share this time with you. Our guest today is coming via Zoom because most guests nowadays are via Zoom. Thankful for the technology that allows us to do that. But our guest is Greg Coker. Greg is, in addition to a lot of other things that he's done in his life, he has been through the Mighty Oaks Warrior Programs, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit, Greg, if we get a chance. But yeah. Greg served 22 years in the United States Army, 15 of that as an AH-6 Little Bird attack helicopter instructor pilot. And there's a lot of things I could say. A huge bio. It's an amazing bio. But he was selected into the Army's only Special Operations Helicopter Unit, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. He was one of the senior lead instructor pilots and planners responsible for planning and executing special operations missions in support of our nation's most elite special operations units, including the 75th Ranger Regiment, 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment, Delta, and many others, of course. And Greg, man, thanks for taking some time to talk to us today.
Well, thank you all. It's an honor and a privilege for me, and being blessed that we can all be here and do this.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
With all the craziness going on there in the world, but no, it's truly an honor. Thank you very much.
We're going to talk about your career. You also have a new book that has partially been released and is coming out, and folks can get that. And excited to talk about that as well. Death Waits in the Dark. Greg, let's go back to before you were in the military. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up, how you grew up, and what motivated you to eventually end up in the Army.
Yeah, sure. My dad was in the Air Force. He did 30 years, and to this day I don't know why, but he did.
You don't know why he did 30 years or why it was in the Air Force?
30 years, yeah, both, kind of both. But no, he's been one of my my heroes and rocks throughout my life. But I was born out in California. He was stationed out there on the West Coast, and then moved around, wound up in Central Illinois at about 9 or 10 years old. My parents divorced. My mother was from there. So I spent up until I was 17. But, like most of us, grew up chasing critters and hunting and shooting bows and dirt clod fights, and we didn't wear helmets. I think we turned out okay. If we had a disagreement, we just threw the kid gloves off, got after it, and then shook hands. And good core values, a very strong Christian background and family. And I owe that for my core values and my beliefs in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So yeah, and it was an agriculture part of the country, and I farmed and ranched and cowboyed.
Yeah.
And I left when I was 17 years old, moved back down to East Texas. I had some kinfolk down here, and yeah, so I
Yeah.
went to work, and I'd been talking to my father for quite some time about the military. I wanted to fly, and I had this infatuation with helicopters because I grew up in the 60s and 70s. The Vietnam War was going on, on one of the two or three channels that we had, and watched that as a child up until my teenage years. And so that was kind of my focus. I really didn't know what I wanted to do or who I wanted to be at that point in my life at 17, 18, 19. And then again, worked on cowboying, ranching, worked in the oil field for a while, some construction. And I walked into an Army recruiter and said, "Hey, I want to join the Army. I want to be all I can be." So so I started there. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Just
great.
good solid childhood, and a lot of loving people. And it takes a tribe. It takes a
Sure.
tribe. You know, we're all a little raucous and rowdy. So
But
yeah.
that was before the participation trophies, so it was okay back then.
Yes. Yeah, you're either a winner or a loser. There was no in between. Yeah, but yeah, I played football, I wrestled, I played baseball.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just a kid.
Do you think that you said you watched the Vietnam War, some of the things that were happening as you were growing up, and there's different responses to that. There are those who saw that happening and they decided, I hate America, or I hate what's happening politically, or I can never support a war like this. But because of where you were coming from, because of your family history and background, you had a very different response to that.
Yes.
And what's interesting is I think about how kids are raised today, and I worry not about necessarily how they're being raised right now, but where they're going to end up. I think a lot of the trouble that we're dealing with now is the result of kids that were not raised in a home that understood faith and understood, hard work and understood getting knocked down or being called a loser sometimes. This process that you just described as your childhood, and then they become adults that don't know how to function in a society that requires cooperation and all of those things. When you contrast the way you were raised with the way you see many, many young people raised today, what's your takeaway from that? Does that concern you, or is it just this is just how it is now, and we need to figure out a different way forward?
Well, no, sir, and thankfully I'm in a part of Texas, and everywhere around here. I've only been exposed to kids and families that have those core values, have a good, solid Christian background and faith. And I do think about our future generations.
Yeah.
And, my focus now, we've got 8 grandkids, my wife and I. So that's my focus, are those grandbabies and loving them, and, what I can do to help mold and shape them like we were done as kids. And as far as our next generations, holy cow, man, it's scary. I mean, the things that I read or I see, and I hear some of the things that come out of kids' mouths today.
Yeah.
And when I was a child, I mean, up until 16, 17, if I'd even thought that, man, I'd have been picking myself up off the ground. And it didn't have to be mom or dad. It was just an adult that,
Yeah.
I mean, that was accepted then.
Yeah.
Yeah, you bet.
There are consequences for what you said, right? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes. Yep. There are consequences for all and every action.
So as a grandparent, I have 4 kids. My oldest is 21. I have a 19-year-old, and then 2 younger kids. So right now, I'm constantly asking myself the question, how can I best prepare my kids for the future, whatever that holds, in spite of what's happening in the world? My wife and I will sit down and have this conversation several times a week. What do we need to be teaching the kids? How can we help them? How can we guide them? How can we walk them through this? As a grandparent of 8 grandkids, what are some of the things that you focus on when you're talking to them and trying to, really equip them to deal with a world that in so many ways is fractured?
Yes, sir. That's a great question. And, my oldest granddaughter, she's 8. And then they go 5 and down to brand new. But they're I'm always impressed at how they think and the things that they say. I mean, they're just, to me, they're so far ahead. When I was 8 years old, and I mean, they're showing cattle, they're showing sheep, they're in 4-H, they're, out with mom and dad feeding cattle, or going out with mom running to town. And
Yeah.
I mean, our kids are just, they're amazing parents. And I didn't have a whole lot to do with any of it, because dad was always gone.
Right.
But yeah, I try to instill the core values, and of course our faith, and I'll relate something that we may discuss or talk about. Even the 5-year-olds, we have two. I will talk to them and then try to relate that to scripture or something that occurred in the Bible.
Yeah.
You bet. You bet.
You said you grew up in a Christian home. How did that translate to you? I mean, when did you realize that wasn't just for your parents, that was for you, and you need to make that real for yourself?
Wow, that's a hard question. Because all of us, as we go through life, as we walk through life, we and I tell everybody, and I have for years, when God's knitting us in our mother's womb, our destiny, our path is already laid out. It's for God's plan. Now, people like me, we try to bump left and right and take offshoot and ramps and roads. And being hard-headed, God will hit us in the head with a 2x4 and say, no, we don't want to go that way. We want to go this way. But there's different phases in life. And I was just talking to a young fellow the other day, a GWAT or Iraqi veteran. I said, we're raised, however, okay, we're all born with sin, and then we go through these phases. So we have redemption, we have salvation, we have baptism, and and then we go on with our Christian life. You look how God's plans laid out for us. And and I know now, at 60 years young, I know what God's purpose is for me. And I struggled with that for a long, long time. And I went off, and thought, well, I know better than God. I'll just do whatever the heck I want to do,
Right.
But he brings you back in because he loves us.
Yeah.
And, and he sent his son to die for us, which, to me, Jesus was the greatest warrior that ever lived. Just read about it.
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine what that man went through in his trials and tribulations.
Yeah.
But yes, sir, it's, and it wasn't until, doggone, I was probably in my 50s. And like I said before, I was in and out, but I still maintained my faith and my Christianity and my love for God. But I got very, very serious after I retired out of the Army. Yeah.
What was the catalyst for getting serious about it?
Hitting a deep, dark place, man. I mean, a deep, dark place. Prescription drugs, alcohol, didn't sleep, more drugs to make you sleep, more alcohol. Because for vets, when we go to sleep, that's when the demons come.
Yeah.
Or even sometimes while we're awake. But I've been on a crusade, so to speak. I don't like that PTS junk. It's not PTS. I want it to be changed to PCS. It's post-combat stress. And there are all levels of PTS, okay? It could be anything traumatic that happens to a human. It could be a car wreck. It could be rape. It could be child abuse. It could be somebody beat you up, or you've been shot, or whatever the case. And there's different levels. And once I was diagnosed with that in 2005, so I dove into researching it and learning as much as I could. And there wasn't a whole lot, that we didn't know a whole lot about it back then. It's been called shell shock. It's been called 1,000-yard stare. And I mean, I read back to World War II, where they studied these guys on the front line. They'd come off, and it was interesting, ironic, really, that the other night there was I saw a documentary about PTS, and they talked about from the Civil War till 2010.
Yeah.
And it was, yeah, it was good, man. It was good. So
I just finished a book a couple weeks ago. I forget the author's name. The book was called Shook Over Hell. And the book was written in 1997, so before the global war on terror and all the things that we've been living through. But it was a look at the Civil War, and in particular, one unit out of Indiana, and all of the characteristics of what we would call post-traumatic stress overlaid on them who, they didn't know any of these things. And so, yeah, he goes back, probably to the beginning of warfare, right? I imagine there was some PTSD in the Garden of Eden when they got thrown out for rebelling against God.
Well,
so
yeah,
it's
King David, and, his 300. Yeah, you bet. You bet.
So what does faith, this is a conversation we have as often as we can because people don't understand it. When we talk about faith and the interaction of that with post-traumatic stress or post-combat stress or, these traumas in our life, how does faith reconcile that for us? How does it take us from that deep hole of depression to purpose and moving forward and finding new purpose and hope in life?
You bet. Well, for me, for Greg Coker, it got me through those extremely difficult times. And I talk about it in depth and detail in the book, and I wrote about it. And that was one of the things that scared me the most and it took me 15 years to write this thing, even though I'd been over those years. Some very close friends, influential people had, told me, said, Greg, you need to write, man. You need to write this stuff down. And Kyle Lamb always said, Gravy, if it ain't written, it never happened. And I took that to heart. And he said that to me for at least 10 years. I used to work for Kyle. I was a firearms instructor. But yeah, what a cool guy.
Yeah.
But and Kyle has a very strong faith. Most of the men that I served with in that community were strong Christians. And they always say that there's no such thing as an atheist in a foxhole when bullets start snapping by you.
Yeah.
But it carried me through those hard times. And as a leader, as a mentor, while engaged in combat, with those other men, it was, I would talk to them or the commander would come to me, or the chaplain was like, hey, can you, talk to this fella or that fella or whatever? And I said, absolutely, because I'd get up prior to major operations and read Psalm 91. That was one of the things I would do. And the chaplains would ask me, or, I'd go talk to fellas. But it definitely, it made a difference in my life. And I've noticed that my best friend, Leon Hansen, took his life in 2015.
Wow.
And here's a guy, he was in Delta. He was, top of his profession and would retire. So I started studying. Guys were falling like flies there for 3 or 4 years, and it broke my heart. So I found the two things in common was, one, they lose hope. Okay. Two, they have no love in God. And I knew these men, I've known them for many years, and I know they had God in their heart. They had Jesus in their heart. And the only other input was that hope part. So, they get out of the Army, they miss the camaraderie. We're all adrenaline junkies, and, that's why we're 5 and 6, 7 time volunteers to go do what we do.
Right.
But again, it goes back, hey, fellas, this is God's plan for us. Okay. It is. And, and every man Jack would get it. And I'd be like, look, dude, we got to go do this. But, when we talk about fear, well, I always told people, well, did you have fear? I said, no, I didn't have fear because God told me, fear not, for I'm with you.
Yeah.
But I was scared.
Yeah,
I was
right,
scared man. Every time we hit the start button or I picked up an M4, yes, I was scared.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah,
fear is what keeps us from killing ourselves.
Fear is it's put in us by God, and I think in part that's what causes us to need to have faith. We have to have confidence in a God who's bigger than that fear. What's interesting about faith, and this is, I think it's a misunderstood truth that faith is not believing that God is going to do what we want him to do. Well, I have faith in God that everything's going to be fine. And it's not burying your head in the sand and pretending like everything's okay. It's what you said in the very beginning when we started talking, that in our mother's womb, God's already laid out the path for us. And I think faith is knowing that God has a plan. I don't know what that plan is, but God has a plan, and I'm going to walk down the path and just trust that he's going to get me exactly where he wants me to be, regardless of whether that feels good or bad at the time. And man, that brings a lot of peace to us when we do that.
It does. And the end state to that is that as a Christian, regardless of what happened or when God chooses that time for me, I knew where I was going.
Yep.
I knew. And I'm like, hey, it's going to be a million times better than this. But right now, my earthly purpose is to do God's will. And that's to go out, find terrorists, and kill them.
Right.
Before they shoot us.
Right. God's giving me a job right now as well.
You bet.
Okay, so I took us on like a 20-minute sideline of our conversation. So let's come back to where we were. Okay, so you went into the military, and the Army has so I come from the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps, the path to becoming a pilot requires, it's a very difficult path, college degree, and a lot of other things they throw in front of you even before you get to the point where you can even, go to school to become a pilot. The Army's a little bit different that way. Maybe talk about your early years going into the Army and some of the things that you did and learned before you went to the 160th.
You bet. Yeah, Pop highly recommended that. He's like, hey, I think you should go in and be enlisted. And I knew about the warrant officer program. The warrant officers are 85% of the pilots in the Army are warrant officers. So I talked to recruiters about that, talked to other folks about it. And so I enlisted and went to the 101st 327th Infantry as infantryman, almost 3 years there. And while I was there, I was putting a packet together. It's your resume, so to speak.
Right.
And then once that's all filled out, it takes you about 6 months. I used to joke with guys. I said, I think they plan on guys quitting for this process. It's just too hard. Yeah, we'll just see how bad he wants to be an aviator. So, and their selling point for years has been from high school to flight school. They take guys right out of high school, 18-year-olds, and if they met those standards that they were looking for, then they went right to flight school. But I wanted I wanted to go and see the Army, and it was for me. I loved it, and I loved shooting things and blowing things up, and golly, they pay you for it. And I was like, this is pretty cool. So I did that. I got accepted to flight school for some crazy reason, and in that process, I had a contingency plan because I told myself, I was like, okay, I like this. This is my path. And I went and interviewed with 275 Ranger Regiment. My brigade commander, my first one was Colonel Ralph Hagler, and he was the 275 commander when they jumped into Grenada in 1983.
Wow!
So I had Colonel Hag. He's like, "You're gonna go be a Ranger," and I was like, "Yes, I want." That's what I wanted to do if I didn't go to flight school, and that's I think my biggest regret is not going and getting my tab and serving in, battalion somewhere. But anyway, it all worked out. So I finished flight school in 1990 and I tracked Cobras, the AH-1, kind of dating myself, but it was like they were phasing them out. The Apache was coming on, the Black Hawk was here, the Huey was going away. And I told my senior TAC in flight school, and he told me I was crazy, but I said, I want to fly Cobras. Nobody wanted to fly guns. Everybody wanted to be, cool lift guys and wear skirts and whatever. But we hack on each other. It's just out of brotherly love and respect. But so, I went to South Korea, 517 Cav on my first assignment as a young W1. And it was, I wasn't real happy, but I was excited. I wasn't happy about leaving a 7-month pregnant wife at
Wow.
the time.
Yeah, right.
On a company tour for a year. But what a great place for a young aviator to go and learn to fly, because you have all types of terrain. You have mountains, you have snow, you have over water, you have urban built up areas. And we flew, I was deployed up north. We were the furthest northern aviation unit. So we had a real world mission up by the border. And that was part of our mission, was that western half of the border there. So yeah, it was serious business, but we flew a lot of night vision goggles. And then immediately following, of course, Desert Storm broke out, and I was like, oh man, I'm gonna miss this one.
Yeah. There's never gonna be another war.
Yeah, when I was signing out on leave the night they jumped into Panama, and I was like, doggone, I missed another one. And but be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, right.
That's what I always told fellas. But so yeah, I had an Apache assignment leaving Korea, and I actually got a 2-month drop, and I got to come home early because when they crunch all their numbers, they were like, oh, we're going to lose a lot of Apache guys. We need to get these guys to Rucker and get them through a short course. So they shortened the course way down to I think 4 weeks or 5 weeks, just learn the switchology in the front seat so you can fire a Hellfire, and we'll send you out to your unit.
Yeah.
And got home on February 9th, I believe, 1991, the day the war close to ending. And got home. I was there probably 4 or 5 hours. Some captain from Fort Rucker called me and says, hey, Mr. Coker, we need you down here tomorrow. I was like, oh, Lord. So I jumped my truck and, drive from Tennessee to Fort Rucker, Alabama, and did that. And then I was assigned to 1st Battalion, 101st Flying Apaches. Had then Lieutenant Colonel Cody, which later became General Cody, as a commander. And yeah, it's just a great bunch of guys. But I was the new guy, and here comes all these heroes from the war, and
yeah.
And I was just like, man, oh man, boy, and attack guys we're just knuckle dragging cavemen, and they give us these cool machines to fly around in and shoot and blow things up. So no, it was good assignment, good experience, and loved that airframe. And then, when I was enlisted, I can remember one day we were sitting behind our barracks and all that in the parking lot. We just come out of the field. We were cleaning weapons and getting stuff all ready. And here come these 4 little black helicopters. They fly right by, and I looked up there and I was like, oh yeah. I asked questions and, kind of knew who they were. Didn't quite know what they did. And my platoon sergeant, he screams at me, go get back to work. I was like, hey, Sergeant, I'm going to fly those one day. He's like, shut up or something. And I wish I could find that guy today, because it'd be cool to send him a picture of me sitting in the cockpit of an AH-6. And so then there's another process to assess for the 160th for any special operations unit. It is a process, and again, you put together your packet, your resume up until that point, and then submit it, and then they board it. And by looking at your paper, it's your go or no go. And again, for some crazy reason, I was a go, and they called me to come assess. So yeah.
So for people that may not be familiar with the special operations community, the AH-6s support the special operations units of the Army. The process of that you just described, of trying out, of applying, going through that selection process, is that something you choose to do, you ask to do? Is that something they come and ask you to do? How does that work? And then what's the mission of of that unit?
Yes, sir. It's an aviators, generally they're about almost mid-career, senior W2 or junior W3. They want to go do that. I mean, back in the 90s, and of course things weren't happening a whole lot.
Yeah.
because of the current administration then. But anyway, so it's just something that you want to go do, and they don't, they didn't back then. They didn't actively. Now they've got a recruiter that actively goes out to different units, and they'll put on briefs and, hey,
Yeah.
we're seeking highly motivated, hardworking people to come do this. And so, yeah, it was just something that, I wanted to do, and that's where the best of the best was. And I wanted to be with the best, work with the best.
Yeah.
I never thought I was the best. I always thought, golly, man, why am I here?
Yeah, right.
How did I get here?
Right.
Because I walked among giants. the real deal dudes, and it was exciting. Yeah, it was exciting.
So how does that work with the helicopter that you're flying? Are you moving people around? Are you supporting them from an air support standpoint? What does that look like?
Right. So the regiment's broken down. We have 4 battalions now. Back then we only had 2. We had 1st Battalion. So that was A Company, B Company, Charlie Company, Delta Company. A Company is the Little Bird, the MH6 lift. So they have planks on the side of their Little Birds, and they can put, 3 dudes on each side, and they can get into really small places and, rooftop streets, all that. And then B Company, Bravo Company, that's the gun company. That's where the AH-6s are. The AH-6s provide precision surgical close air support for Special Operations Ground Forces.
Wow.
And then the other 2, C and D, were the Lift Black Hawk and our DAP. So that's the armed Black Hawk. And then 2nd Battalion was our Chinook. That's our Chinook Battalion. We also now have a battalion, 3rd Bats in Savannah, Georgia, and then 4th Bats out at Fort Lewis, out west.
Wow, incredible. You did that, so you joined that unit in mid to late 90s. That's before 9/11, obviously. But when 9/11 happened, that changed kind of the game for everyone in the military at that time.
Life-changing.
What did that do for you, and then where did that take you?
Yeah, that first of all, that was, I was in shock. Everybody was in shock because we were all thinking, how in the world could anybody do this in this day and age and this time and the technology that we have? But they got her done. They did. They had a plan. They executed the plan. So for me as a professional soldier, professional aviator, it was, and I'm not kidding, it was my dream come true, because you think of a professional athlete, okay? And he goes to practice every day for 10 years, for 12 years, and never gets to play a game.
Yeah.
Well, that was Greg Coker's case. Many of the guys were combat vets when I got there, but when we deployed in 2001 to Afghanistan, none of us we're all cherries.
Yeah.
There wasn't any combat vets. The first gen of guys had all retired and left, and so we were the new ones. We were the new generation.
People outside of the military, I've had this conversation, many times, have a hard time understanding why you'd want to go to war, and they think it's about the violence or the whatever. It really is exactly what you just said. You train for something and train for something and train for something. You feel like you're good at what you do, but you don't really know until those tracer rounds are coming back your direction and you're trying to figure it out in real time.
Yes. What am I doing here?
I remember, so 9/11 happened. My battalion was supposed to go to Afghanistan in support of what was happening in the country. So we were, it doesn't matter, but we were supposed to do that. We got pulled at the last minute. And our entire battalion was in a complete state of depression because this was it. The war's going to be over. We're not going to get a chance to go. This thing's not going to last very long. Everyone remembered Desert Storm, 100 and whatever hours. It was quick.
Hours.
This is going to be the same thing. And it turned out it wasn't that way. But that's a hard thing for people to understand that aren't a part of that.
It is. Yeah, we're not warmongers but and I had that conversation with folks. I'm like, we're professionals, and we, God brought us to this place in this time, and it's our duty, one, to serve our country. It's what we volunteered to do.
That's right.
and we take it very, very seriously,
That's right.
especially at that level. I mean, we're the pointy end of the spear,
Sure.
and it's, yeah, every man there wanted to be there, and I mean, we were all chomping at the bit.
Yeah.
Plus, we were angry
Right. Sure.
because those, they'd killed a bunch of our brothers and sisters, and they had attacked our country, and I mean, that's what we do.
Yeah.
We go find them and kill them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that changes even your job. So you went from, being a pilot, eventually you'd be an instructor in that community as well.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm sure we're getting to your book, but what are some of the experiences there that shaped, how when you come out of the military and you talked about that deep hole that you were in and trying to reconcile some of those things, what were some of those experiences that put you in that place and that you wrote about in your book?
Yes. Yeah, it was, I mean, it's doggone, that's a tough question. Nobody's asked me that before. I think that, just seeing the atrocities, war is a terrible thing. Don't take it out of context.
Yeah, right. That's right.
It is, and being where I was and the men that I was with, being where we were, I mean, you see the atrocities of what humans can do to each other, and and I thought about that a lot. I mean, it was some pretty nasty stuff, and some of the things that I did. I mean, we carried dual miniguns and 17-pound rockets on the aircraft, and you engage a human with a second squirt of minigun, they disappear into a mist. So, and if a guy ever said, "Nah, it doesn't bother me," well, you need to go talk to Doc,
right?
Because you're probably not going to be here any.
There's probably something wrong with you.
Yeah, we had full-time psychologists there to compound the unit, but it was to help us and help our families, and and I've said in the past, the focus has been on the veteran. And by golly, I think there should be, and there is nowadays, but back then there should have been more focus on those family members, those spouses, those kids, because I've seen them with the same symptoms as me, or my buddies or brothers or whatever. And but we're getting better. We're getting better at doing that. I mean, look at Mighty Oaks.
Sure.
It's a whole family concept. It's not just the man or the head spouse, but
yeah,
it's that family. So
that's right.
That's critical into keeping everybody, with self-worth and helping each other out as a family unit. It takes a tribe, and
Sure.
I always say that. It's a tribe. It's a tribe. It's a tribe. And back to the book is, I say in there at the very beginning, this is not about me, but it's about my team, about our tribe. It's about our triumphs, our failures, our trials, our tribulations, and that roller coaster that warrior rides. And it doesn't stop when you retire. It doesn't stop when you come home. It's there. It's ingrained in that RAM somewhere back in the brain.
Yep.
And it affects different people differently. And I kind of break it down. You look at these young guys, these 18, 19, 20-year-old Rangers that do an airfield seizure or combat jump, or we go hit targets. Well, they don't have that life experience and that maturity that special operators do. I mean,
yeah.
I think at one time I calculated the mean age and just B company was like 39 years old. I mean, we're a bunch of old dudes,
right.
And a few of us with a little gray hair, and all of us have a lot of gray hair now. But yeah, I think it's critical that you understand the whole picture and what's going on. But yeah, the things that a human sees and that you try to process it's difficult.
Yep.
It is. It really is.
One of the things the description of your book talks about is the phrase is the incredible friendships with fellow compatriots forged in the heat of combat. And those relationships are really important in combat, aren't they?
Yes, they're extremely important, because when it gets down to a firefight and you're standing toe to toe, it's not about your country, your flag, your mom, whatever. It's about the guy on your left and the guy on the right. And
Yeah.
that's it, man. That in that time, in that moment, and I've talked to guys about it after just some, junkyard dog mean firefights and close fights, and your buddies dropping. You see them get hit, or you got to pull them off a Blackhawk. They're
Yeah.
burnt so bad their mom wouldn't recognize them,
Hmm.
and those are the kind of things that just stay with you, because there's no greater love. There isn't. There isn't. So
I think one of the challenges of separating out of the military, which is why I believe so many retirees, veterans have such a hard time, is those relationships. They're so important, they're so deep, and then you
yes.
leave them behind, and now you're out there on your own trying to figure things out.
Yeah, it's very scary. It really is, and that's we all deal with that. And for me, I put my head down and tightened my rucksack straps and went on to my next phase and try to integrate into society and be a good citizen. And I don't think I'll ever fully reintegrate into society. And but no, you got to have help getting focus and getting help, and you got to use your buddies and continue those relationships. And I tell guys, I'm like, hey, I try every day to tell somebody that I love them. And you may have saved that person's life, or working with vets, or working with nonprofits, or working with Mighty Oaks, and just trying to help folks out.
Yeah. I think one of the great things about folks with your experience and others writing books about that experience is it can give some context to those young soldiers, in your case, those young Marines, those young warriors who are out there. And I think we do a good job in the military of saying you need to read military history, you need to read about tactics and strategy and all that. We do a really bad job of saying, why don't you read this book from someone who's experienced the ups and downs of combat, the loss of friends, and the other side, how they moved through that. And I think the military is starting to understand that. We call it resiliency training.
Yeah.
But I really believe that one of the important, if my son were going to the military today, I'd have him read books like this and others from that firsthand account of not just the struggles, but the triumphs on the other side of that. It's just so critical.
It is very critical, very critical. And that was one of the driving forces to write. And because I wanted to help those people. I wanted to help veterans. I wanted to help, a young person that may be thinking about going into the military, or they're already active duty and they're like, hey, I want to go be one of these special ops guys, And well, here's the real deal.
Yeah.
This is what happened to me and the guys around me. So
Yeah.
I want to help kids understand what their dads did, because we couldn't talk about these things, or where we were, or no communication at many times. So yeah, that's
When
one
you
of the intents for writing.
when you think back to the Vietnam War, that era that you were considering military service, how some of those veterans perhaps were treated, or how their stories were being spun by the media and others, does that motivate you in any way now on this side to tell these stories and to tell them truthfully and honestly and make sure people really understand what happened there?
Yes, that very much so, very much so. And man, this country, they treated our Vietnam vets like crap. They did. And every time I see a Vietnam vet, wearing a hat, or I'll meet one at a function, and I'll give them a hug, shake their hand, and I'll tell them, welcome home. Thank you for your service.
Yeah.
Because they never got that. And man, he'll start crying, I start crying, and yeah, the emotions flow and fly. But yeah, it had impact on me, and it's unfortunate, but it happened. So all we can do now is, tell them, hey, I love you, welcome home, and thank you for your service and what you did.
And for veterans now to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Yeah. Man, so much here. Where can someone follow your work, find your book, and support what you're doing?
You bet. we got a Facebook page, Death Waits in the Dark, Instagram, Death Waits in the Dark, www.deathwaitsinthedark.com. That's our website. Yeah, and I mean Facebook, I try to get as much out on social media as possible. Of course, word of mouth, and I tell everybody that all my proceeds I donate. I donate to nonprofits. Last month in December, I donated $12,000.
Wow.
To 3 different organizations.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm just excited about it, and it's God's blessed me with good income and a good living. So that's where I'm taking this next juncture, this next phase of Greg Coker's life. So I want to help those folks.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. Last question. If you did have one of those young men, one of those young Rangers or those young soldiers in front of you right now, and he's going out to do whatever they do, what would you tell him? What would your advice be to him?
If they're currently active duty,
sure,
take care of yourself first, okay? Because you can't help anybody if you go down, you get wounded, you get hurt. And then watch the guys on your left and right.
Yeah.
Because that's who's going to be there with you no matter what happens. And the last thing, the most important, never quit, ever. I don't care how bad it gets. If you won't quit, you'll get through it. You'll get through it. And trust in the Lord. He'll get you through it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Greg, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate the time.
It's been an honor. God bless you and Mighty Oaks and the things you guys are doing.
It's beautiful. For those of you that are watching, listening, thank you for doing that. Go and find Death Waits in the Dark. Get the book. Get a couple copies. Give it to someone that you know. And particularly if you know someone in the military right now, give that to them. This context is so important. And we have the privilege through technology and other things to help those who are going through these situations, these circumstances, and trying to figure this out for themselves, to give them the help that they need. And I'd encourage you to do that. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.